Hey guys, I'm going to explain what the unscheduled treatment functionality is in Teamio. What this screen refers to is something we call the master list. You get to the screen by clicking on the unscheduled treatment menu option located all the way at the top. By default, you are seeing patients who have something treatment planned within the last 6 months. And how you know that is by looking at these two dates here, treatment plan date from and treatment plan date to. You can change this date to include whatever time range you want. But general rule you should remember is this range cannot be more than 1 year. I'd like to just get a list of patients who have something treatment planned within the last 6 months. So you can enter those custom dates here and hit apply, and you would get that smaller list. Okay, right now you're looking at all the patients who have something treatment planned in the last 6 months, so that's why it's quite large. The middle panel here is going to show you if you have any list, custom list that you've created. I've got certain custom lists created here, but I will come back to this section in another video on list creation. The right side, the right panel here shows you the goals that have been set up for your practice, like daily number of goals, the weekly and the monthly. And this will change in real time as you are making calls on a daily basis, weekly, as well as monthly. The two buttons here that you're seeing, the add to existing list and creating new list. Again, I will come back to those when we start talking about creating custom list. All right. But for now, I want to focus on the actual list of patients here in the data that you're looking at. So when you first look at this, just remember that the list of patients you're seeing are sorted by the date treatment planned, starting from the most recent. All right. Like for example, today is December 10th. So I'm looking at November 26th, going back far to 6 months. So under the first patient column here, you're looking at the patient name, which is linked. So if you click on it, what's going to open up is something called our follow-up panel, which is here. Okay. So again, I will come back to this. So again, let's take a look at it again. If you click on a patient, this is where you start to follow up on a patient. Okay. So this is referred to as our follow-up panel. And again, there's a bit of information on the screen, which I will have a dedicated video for this. I'll come back to this. So let's close this out for a second. The green icon next to the patient means that this patient belongs to a custom list. And you can actually see that in this little pop over here. So if you click on it, it will take you to this list page. All right. So for now, let's not focus on it. I will come back to it in another video on list creation. The provider is the provider that is assigned to that patient in Open Dental. For a practice with multiple doctors or associates, the important thing you have to remember here is that providers have to be set up correctly in Open Dental. For example, if you have patients who see certain providers in your practice, these patients must have their corresponding doctor set up as their primary provider. So why is it important to set this up this way? Well, because if you got it set up correctly in Open Dental, you'll be able to, again, like I said, is create a custom list of patients belonging to that certain provider, and then having a treatment coordinator only working on those list of patients for that specific provider. The next three columns are, pretty self-explanatory. It says carrier. So if the patient has insurance attached in Open Dental, it will show up here which plan it is. Okay. If you see blank, it just means that patient does not have an insurance attached. The next column here, you're looking at the primary insurance amounts. Okay. So you're looking at the maximum. For the example, this patient here has $3,000 maximum, and they've used about 1,062. What you're looking at here in this column is the treatment plan amount, your UCR fee, as well as the net adjusted fees. Now, the most important columns on this page, I would say, is the last three columns, especially since you're going to be looking at this list to start calling and following up with patients who have pending treatment. So the status column shows the status of the most recent follow-up for this patient. It's basically telling you, hey, what happened when you last called this patient to follow up? So for example, this patient here has not been called. That's why it says not called. And in under attempts column, you see it's 0. There's nothing there because the patient has not been called yet. All right. Here you can see that this patient Jamie, you can see that one attempt has been done. All right. And what happened last time was we left a message with the family. And the next follow-up action plan dictates, hey, what's supposed to happen next? And according to this, there is a date on it. A follow-up was supposed to be done on December 4th. Now, the red dot is going to indicate that, hey, that follow-up was supposed to be done on December 4th, but it is now past due. So why do we show that? Is let's say, it sets up accountability. It gives you just a visual of when you look at this page, it says, okay, I was supposed to do these on these dates, but I never got to them. So I would probably focus on those and the ones that say today. Okay. And I'll come back to that. So for example, like I said, the date refers to the date that follow-up was supposed to be done. How does this date appear here? The date is determined automatically. Again, I will come back to it in a separate video when you actually follow up with the patient, but the date gets populated here automatically initially when you follow up with the patient, depending on the rules set up in your practice. Okay, the frequency, like when you first follow with the patient, okay, when the next follow-up is due, when the third follow-up is due. However, even though it's done and calculated automatically, you can change it. You see this little down icon, the down arrow icon. If you click on it, you can actually change the follow-up date to, okay, well, I'd like to actually start following up today. I know I'm late. I haven't followed up since December 4th, but I'm going to start doing it today. So if you just click that and you hit save, it'll say today. All right. And you can come back to it. You don't have to do that before you start following up. But let's say, let's say it's the manager going through this list and say, look, you know what? I think we need to start doing these calls today. So I'm just going to set the date here. All right. So now what's going to happen is whoever, the treatment coordinator or any other front desk personnel who's looking at this list, they can just go down and say, okay, these are due today. So I've got to get to those first. Okay. And of course, tend to the ones that are past due. When you see this orange tag called follow-ups done, it means you have completed the maximum number of follow-ups for this patient, meaning in your office settings, whoever set Teamio up, when you first started using Teamio, it was decided that maximum number of times a patient is to be called for unscheduled treatment is about 3 times. And when you reach that, when you've followed up 3 times, it's not going to let you follow up again because it says follow-ups done. So for example, if you try to click on a patient, it tells you that, hey, you have completed the maximum number of follow-ups allowed, all right? And you're not going to be able to follow up here. So there is logic built in for all of that, okay? The icons here refer to the method of a follow-up. So for example, this patient, we sent an email to this patient for follow-up. The next attempt was a phone call, and also the last attempt was a phone call. All right, that's what those icons refer to. If you see a do not follow up, it can be done 2 different ways, meaning you clicked on a patient and you selected a status that says it's not going to let you follow up because there's a do not follow up sign. And again, I will get into this detail when we start following up with patients, is if we click on it, if I select a status that's been mapped to that do not follow up according to your office settings, for example, discontinued phone number, there is no next follow-up due. So if I hit save, now automatically when it comes back, it's going to say do not follow up. And if you try to follow up again, it tells you that, hey, this patient is marked as do not follow up. The other way of doing it is, for example, you can actually remove this, like stop follow-ups, okay? So for example, any patient who has been followed up on, if you click this down arrow, you can either change the date of the next follow-up due, okay? Or click on stop follow-up and it'll actually it'll tell you that you can no longer follow up with that patient. All right, so there's a lot of quick actions available from the list you're looking at already, and there's a lot of customizations available. If you see this green tag that says appointment on schedule, that means this patient has something in their treatment plan. That's why they're showing up on this list, but they already have an appointment on schedule, and it's on January 8th. Okay, so you do want to look at that because you may not want to call somebody who has an appointment coming up next week and you're following up with them for pending treatment. Okay, it doesn't make sense to do that because you're going to see them next week. All right, why do we include that? Why would they show up on this screen with patients with appointment scheduled when this is about unscheduled treatment? Because you could have a patient with like 10 fillings on their treatment plan, but they're only scheduled for 1 filling next week. Okay, so they're still going to show up on this treatment plan, on this list. So what you can do, let's say you wanted to get, just hide the patients with who have appointments on schedule already. What you would do is there's a little flag here. It says only show patients without appointments in the next 60 days. So if I click that, if I toggle that on, it's going to hide those patients. So you no longer see that patient with the green tag that says appointment schedule. So then you can just focus on the ones that don't have any appointments and who still have pending treatment. Okay. But I like to leave it off, and I actually like to see who has appointments scheduled. All right. If you come to the top, right underneath the columns, there is some filtering that you can do. So for example, filter by patient, okay? And it's, I would say it's live. What that means is, you don't even have to, let's say the patient's last name is Shah. If you just type in SH, for example, here, it starts to filter directly, and it brings up all those patients with the first 2 letters. And now let's just say I know the last name is Shah, so I'm just going to type in the full last name. Now it just brings up all the patients with those. All right. So it's just a quick way. If sometimes we know the patient's name from top of our head, and we just want to bring their name up. However, remember, you're looking at this list of patients who have something treatment plan in the last 6 months. If you try to find somebody in here and you don't see them, that means their treatment plan date does not match either, in that range. So just keep that in mind. Okay. Carrier, if you wanted to pull up patients, let's say Aetna. Okay. So I'm just going to type in Aetna here. Okay. These are all patients with Aetna that have something, treatment plan within the last 6 months who have not scheduled an appointment. Okay. So if I wanted to do MetLife, you don't even have to type the whole word in. You can just type in M and it'll come up. Okay. Same thing here. You could actually filter by status. So I just want to see ones that are not called. Okay, so now I'm looking at only patients that are not called or patients who have appointment on schedule. That's it for this video, and I hope this was helpful. Please continue on to other videos under unscheduled treatment category to go over details on how to use these filters, how to use list creation to use this section on top, etc.